Charlotte, although she's young, but remarkably steady, shows more respect for the crown than Meghan ever demonstrated. Reassigning Sussex to her isn't punishment, it's necessity. She will honor what Meghan treated carelessly.
Christmas at the palace was supposed to unfold according to tradition, every chair positioned, every name checked, every royal rank understood before the first guest entered the room. But moments before the king's banquet began, one place setting suddenly carried a different meaning. Princess Charlotte walked toward the seat everyone expected Camilla to occupy, stopped beside it and sat down. What happened next froze the room and transformed an ordinary royal dinner into a confrontation nobody had prepared for. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the Christmas banquet depended on order. The king's Christmas banquet was a family dinner, arranged around seniority and proximity to the sovereign, meaning the monarch himself. Where someone sat could quietly signal trust and standing inside the family. That was why Charlotte's choice landed with such force. She had not wandered into an empty chair. She had taken the place reserved for Camilla beside her grandfather. Princess Charlotte kept her hands still, yet William saw the strain immediately. The future king recognized the difference between confusion and resolve. She had seen the place card, she understood the seating plan, and she had chosen that chair anyway. When he glanced farther down the table, he saw her original card still waiting. Nothing had been misplaced. Camilla entered expecting the evening to proceed as planned. The Queen Consort, a title used for the wife of a reigning king, stopped several steps from the table when she saw Charlotte beside Charles. Surprise hardened into humiliation. Conversation faltered. She looked at the child, then at her husband, demanding an explanation. The king understood the danger at once. Ordering Charlotte away would embarrass his granddaughter, but allowing her to remain would make his wife's displacement impossible to ignore. William felt the room tighten when a palace aide approached him. The man leaned close and confirmed that Charlotte's original seat had never been changed by staff. Someone had made a deliberate choice. An attendant stepped toward the young princess, preparing to correct the arrangement. Charles moved first. He set down his glass, looked toward Charlotte, then raised one hand before the attendant could speak. "Leave it," the king said. Camilla did not move. Charlotte remained seated. William watched his father with unease because Charles did not look surprised. He looked prepared, and that meant the king already knew there was something deeper behind his granddaughter's decision. Charlotte may have taken the chair, but to understand why Charles refused to make her surrender it, the palace had to confront what that seat represented to every person around the table. The shock inside the banquet room was not created by furniture. It came from the people surrounding it. Charlotte was the king's granddaughter. Camilla was his wife. William was the heir watching both. Catherine sat close enough to understand every glance but too far away to protect her daughter from the consequences. Suddenly, one chair had placed 3 generations of the monarchy in direct emotional conflict, and nobody could pretend the decision was meaningless. Princess Charlotte understood more than many adults around her wanted to admit. The young royal had grown up surrounded by ceremonial order, meaning the formal rules that govern where members of the family stand, sit, and appear during important occasions. She knew that every position could carry a message. She had also watched her mother live under relentless attention, and that had taught her something early. Even small gestures inside the monarchy could become statements about respect, rank, and belonging. Camilla understood that truth just as clearly. The chair beside Charles had become more than a place at dinner. For the Queen Consort, the title given to the wife of a reigning king, sitting beside him reinforced her position as his closest adult companion during family occasions. Losing that place in front of everyone was not simply inconvenient. It felt like a public reduction of her standing, and the silence around the table made that humiliation impossible to dismiss. Catherine watched her daughter carefully. The princess could see that Charlotte was tense, but she also saw determination in the way the girl remained still. She leaned toward her and asked quietly whether she was certain she wanted to stay there. Charlotte looked at her mother, nodded once, and kept her hands folded in her lap. Catherine did not order her to move. She feared that correcting her publicly would humiliate her, and something in Charlotte's expression told her this decision had not begun tonight. William felt the pressure differently. The prince wanted to protect his daughter, yet he also understood that he was the heir, the person expected one day to inherit the crown. Allowing Charlotte to challenge an established arrangement could easily be read as his approval. He moved closer and asked her softly why she had taken the seat. Charlotte answered without hesitation. Grandpapa said family comes before the seating plan. William froze. Charles had clearly spoken to her before this night, and suddenly the king's calm reaction made sense. His father did not ask how she reached the chair. He simply looked toward her plate and told her to eat before the food became cold. Camilla eventually sat elsewhere, but she barely touched the meal. Her anger narrowed into one question she could no longer ignore. What exactly had Charles told Charlotte before Christmas? The answer would lead everyone back to an encounter weeks earlier, a small Christmas planning dispute that had quietly become the point of no return. The banquet confrontation did not begin on Christmas night. Its true beginning came weeks earlier, during what should have been an insignificant planning meeting. A place card was moved, a comment was made. Charlotte heard something that adults assumed she would forget. She did not. And from that moment forward, the young princess began viewing the Christmas seating plan not as harmless tradition, but as a question of who was allowed to matter inside her own family. Catherine entered the room with Princess Charlotte after another family engagement and found staff reviewing the Christmas arrangement. The seating rehearsal was simply a practice run, used to confirm where every guest would sit before the banquet. But the positions carried emotional weight, because the king's table had slowly changed as the family itself changed. Camilla had become increasingly protective of ceremonial precedence, the formal order that determines who stands or sits ahead of whom during royal occasions. Camilla moved toward the table and lifted Charlotte's place card. The queen consort shifted it farther away from Charles, then told an aide that Catherine's children needed to learn where everyone stands. She did not realize the young princess had stopped in the doorway. Charlotte heard every word. Her face changed instantly, but she said nothing until the room had cleared. Catherine noticed the silence first. She asked her daughter what was wrong, and Charlotte finally looked at her with a question that cut deeper than anger. Why should sitting near her grandfather depend on where everyone stands? The princess tried to reassure her, but Charlotte had already connected the moved card with something personal. To her, distance from the king suddenly felt like distance from the family itself. William reacted differently when Catherine told him that evening. The prince became angry and wanted to confront Camilla immediately. He saw the remark as unnecessary and cruel, especially because Charlotte had heard it directly. Catherine stopped him. She feared that one confrontation would become another palace battle, and she believed the matter could still be contained. Charles learned the truth days later from Charlotte herself during a private conversation. The king expected a simple visit, but his granddaughter quietly asked whether he had personally wanted her moved farther away at Christmas. He was visibly shaken by the question. She had spent days believing that the seating change might have come from him. Charles answered carefully. He told Charlotte that no seating chart could decide how much she mattered to him. Then he gave her one sentence she would carry into Christmas night. Never confuse ceremony with family. Charlotte left without revealing what those words had awakened in her. Charles remained alone, looked at the old seating plan, folded it once, and placed it inside a drawer. Weeks later, Charlotte saw Camilla's chair beside him and acted. And when Charlotte finally acted on the king's own words, Camilla was no longer willing to treat the incident as the innocent decision of a granddaughter. For several minutes, Camilla remained silent. Then the restraint broke. Away from the larger table, with only the closest family members within earshot, she demanded to know whether Charlotte's action would be corrected. The question was directed toward Charles, but everyone understood that William and Catherine were being challenged as well. What followed was not an argument about dinner etiquette. It was a struggle over authority, loyalty, and who could tell a future king's daughter where she belonged. Camilla waited until the opening course had ended before asking Charles to step into an adjoining room. The queen consort wanted the matter settled before the evening moved any further. William followed when he heard Charlotte's name mentioned, while Catherine remained beside her daughter, refusing to leave the young princess alone after everything that had already happened. Charles tried to contain the damage. The king told his wife that the banquet could continue without turning one seating dispute into an official family confrontation. Ceremonial arrangements, the formal rules governing positions and precedence at royal events, mattered because they signaled order. But he also knew that forcing Charlotte to move now would create a different message one that everyone at the table would understand. Camilla rejected that argument immediately. She told Charles that allowing Charlotte to remain in her place made her look powerless in front of the family. Worse, it suggested that his grandchildren could ignore established arrangements whenever they felt hurt. She wanted the decision reversed before silence hardened into precedent. William stepped forward when his daughter was described as disrespectful. The prince reminded Camilla that Charlotte had heard the earlier remark about needing to learn where everyone stands. She had spent weeks wondering whether her own grandfather wanted her pushed farther away. He would not accept the idea that her reaction had appeared from nowhere. Camilla turned sharply toward Charles. She suddenly understood that he already knew about the rehearsal incident. She asked why he had never confronted her. The king did not avoid the question. He said he had hoped the matter would correct itself quietly before another family disagreement became a lasting wound. Charles then admitted the part that changed everything. He had deliberately stopped the attendant from moving Charlotte. The monarch had not planned what his granddaughter did, but once she acted, he refused to humiliate her publicly for following words he himself had given her about family and ceremony. Camilla looked directly at him. "Ask her to move." Charles remained silent for several seconds. "No." William stared at his father. A private disagreement had just become a royal decision. Camilla refused to let the issue end there. If Charles would not restore the seat himself, she insisted they determine who actually controlled the ceremonial arrangement. But Camilla's demand exposed a deeper question. Was that chair truly hers to claim, or could the king change the arrangement with a single word? Palaces survive on rules, but families survive on discretion, and the Christmas banquet suddenly forced those two worlds into collision. Camilla believed established precedent protected her place. William believed the king could decide who sat beside him in his own family gathering. Charles now had to determine whether correcting Charlotte would preserve order or merely reward the very behavior that had caused the confrontation. And behind the ceremonial language was something painfully human: a grandfather deciding whether to defend his granddaughter. Charles withdrew with William after the confrontation, knowing the issue could no longer be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Inside the royal household, staff could suggest the seating plan and protocol advisors could consider precedents, meaning the formal order used to rank people at official occasions. But the sovereign still held final discretion over a private family banquet. That distinction mattered now because the chair beside him carried symbolism without being an untouchable right. Charles admitted that he hated the position he had been placed in. The king did not want Camilla humiliated, but he also refused to make Charlotte feel that an adult could diminish her, and then use ceremony to enforce the message. He told William that whichever decision he made would wound someone, and that was precisely why the issue had become more serious than a chair. William answered carefully. The prince did not defend everything his daughter had done, and he knew Charlotte had made a deliberate challenge. But he refused to condemn her as though she had created the conflict herself. She had heard an adult tell staff that the children needed to learn where everyone stands. In his mind, the responsibility began long before Christmas night. Charles wanted certainty. He summoned the household official responsible for the seating arrangement and asked one direct question: who had ordered Charlotte's place card moved during the earlier rehearsal? The official hesitated, then confirmed that the request had come from Camilla. It had not come from the king. Charles removed his glasses and placed them beside the seating document. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then this began before Charlotte ever sat down. The confirmation hardened his decision. Charles ruled that the table would remain unchanged for the rest of the evening. Charlotte would stay beside him. Camilla would keep the alternate chair. No attendant would interfere, and no further attempt would be made to reverse the arrangement during the banquet. Camilla heard the ruling and understood its deeper meaning immediately. This was no longer temporary embarrassment. The queen consort had believed her place beside Charles was protected by habit and position. Now the king had demonstrated that habit could be overridden by his personal judgment. The king's ruling ended the argument over the chair, but it immediately began something far more painful: the reckoning over what the decision said about Camilla's place inside the family. When the family returned to the table, the banquet looked almost unchanged. Candles remained lit, plates were served, conversations restarted in carefully measured tones. But nobody inside the room believed the night had returned to normal. Charlotte remained beside the king. Camilla sat elsewhere. William watched every movement. Catherine barely looked away from her daughter. The most powerful message of the evening was now being delivered, without anyone needing to say another word. Camilla accepted the alternate seat, because leaving would have made the rupture impossible to contain. The queen consort understood that household staff, the people responsible for managing the royal family's private and official arrangements, had already witnessed enough. Walking out would turn a painful family disagreement into an unmistakable break. So she stayed, composed herself, and acted as though the evening could still continue. 30. Princess Charlotte did not celebrate. The young royal spoke politely with Charles and kept her voice low, showing none of the triumph others might have expected. She had taken the chair because she felt hurt, not because she wanted a victory. The king seemed to understand that distinction. He spoke to her gently, trying to restore the warmth between grandfather and granddaughter without making the moment feel like a reward. Camilla heard Charles laugh softly at something Charlotte said, and that small sound cut deeper than the seating change itself. She had lost more than physical proximity. She was now watching a bond strengthen in the very place where she had expected her own position to be affirmed. The queen kept her expression controlled, but the humiliation had become personal. Catherine watched her daughter with mixed emotions. The princess felt proud that Charlotte had defended herself, yet she also feared what the confrontation might teach her. Courage had protected the girl tonight, but courage could become dangerous if it made her believe every wound had to be answered publicly. Catherine knew the consequences were now bigger than Charlotte understood. Camilla received the next blow during dessert. An aide handed her a folded note confirming that Charles had ordered all future private family seating changes involving William's children to require his personal approval. The instruction was simple, but its meaning was devastating. The king had removed an area of informal influence she had previously exercised without question. Camilla folded the note carefully and left it beside her untouched dessert. Across the table, Charlotte noticed her expression. The defiance in the young princess began to fade. Charles noticed it too. After dinner, the king quietly asked Charlotte to remain behind. For the first time that night, Charlotte began to fear the cost of what she had done, and only Charles could tell her whether she had protected something important or simply wounded someone else. The most important conversation of the night happened after the banquet, when the uniforms, place cards, advisors, and protocol disappeared. Charles asked Charlotte to remain behind. No William, no Catherine, no Camilla. Just a grandfather and his granddaughter facing the meaning of a choice that had shaken the household. Charlotte entered expecting a reprimand. Instead, the king asked a question that stripped the entire confrontation of rank and ceremony. Why had she believed she needed to claim a chair in order to prove that she belonged beside him? Charles already knew part of the answer. The king remembered their earlier conversation, when he had told Charlotte never to confuse ceremony with family. Ceremony, in this context, meant the formal rules and traditions that shape royal events without defining private affection. He understood why those words had stayed with her, but he also needed her to understand something equally important. Deliberately embarrassing someone at a formal gathering could create wounds that lasted long after the table was cleared. Princess Charlotte finally admitted what she had been afraid to say. The young royal told her grandfather that when her place card had been moved farther away, she wondered whether she mattered less to him. She had wanted Charles to see her before anyone could move her again. The confession changed the tone completely. What had looked like defiance suddenly sounded like fear. Charles became quiet. The monarch stopped talking about rank, rules, or precedence, and spoke only as a grandfather. He told Charlotte that no child should ever feel required to compete with an adult for affection. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. "You never had to fight for my love." Charlotte's composure broke. She admitted softly that she had not been certain of that until tonight. Charles stayed with her in the silence, allowing the meaning of the words to settle before he continued. Charles then made his own promise. He told Charlotte that he would speak privately with Camilla and make clear that no future household decision involving the children could be used to send a personal message about who mattered more. The king would not allow ceremony to become a weapon inside the family again. Charlotte hesitated before asking the hardest question. Should she apologize? Charles answered yes, but he drew a careful line. She did not need to apologize for loving her family, feeling hurt, or wanting reassurance. She needed to apologize for knowingly causing humiliation when a quieter path might have been possible. Charlotte nodded, The anger that had carried her through the banquet had disappeared, replaced by something heavier: responsibility. Before the palace could wake to the consequences, she knew exactly whom she needed to face. But healing between grandfather and granddaughter could not complete the night. One person still carried the humiliation of that empty chair, and Charlotte knew she had to face her. Royal secrets rarely remain confined to royal rooms. By morning, fragments of the Christmas banquet had escaped the palace. Charlotte beside the king, Camilla seated elsewhere, and Charles refusing to reverse the arrangement. The country did not see a place card dispute, it saw symbolism. Some interpreted the moment as a granddaughter defending her place in the family. Others saw an uncomfortable humiliation inflicted upon the queen. Within hours, one chair had become the most discussed object in Britain. Palace communications staff moved quickly once they realized several guests and household employees had witnessed enough of the confrontation to repeat different versions outside the family circle. The communications team, meaning the officials responsible for managing public messaging and press questions, faced a dangerous choice. Explaining too much would confirm a private dispute. Saying too little would allow speculation to grow around Charlotte. William reacted with anger when morning commentary began describing his daughter as though she had deliberately entered a political battle. The prince understood why the story attracted attention, but he refused to let Charlotte become a symbol for competing factions inside the monarchy. Catherine shared that concern. When he saw the first newspaper front page at breakfast, he closed it immediately and told her, "She is a child before she is a symbol." The princess quietly removed the paper before Charlotte entered. Camilla experienced the coverage differently. The queen consort had already endured the humiliation inside the banquet room, but seeing the moment reduced to headlines, diagrams, and speculation made the wound feel larger. What had happened among family was now being interpreted by strangers as evidence that her standing beside Charles had weakened. The fictional morning edition of the Chronicle captured the frenzy most sharply. Its front page carried an illustration of the banquet table beneath the headline, "Charlotte takes the king's side," with Camilla's empty chair circled beside it. Television broadcasters repeated the image throughout the morning, debating why Charles had refused to move his granddaughter and whether that decision carried a deeper message. Outside Buckingham Palace, the reaction became more personal. A small Christmas crowd gathered near the gates, and conversations focused less on Charles than on Charlotte. One woman raised a handwritten sign reading, "Family before rank." The words echoed the very principle the king had privately given his granddaughter weeks earlier. Charlotte heard enough of the reaction to understand what had happened. Her decision had escaped the family and become something much larger, but she was no longer interested in winning the argument. Before any formal palace response could be approved, Charlotte went directly to Camilla. The world could debate what the chair meant for days, but the monarchy's real verdict would be decided by what Charlotte and Camilla said when they finally stood face to face without Charles between them. By the following morning, the palace had already turned Charlotte's decision into a story about winners and losers. But inside the family, the meaning became something far more complicated. Charlotte had kept the chair. Camilla had lost it. Charles had defended his granddaughter. Yet none of them emerged untouched. The final chapter was not about who sat beside the king. It was about whether a family shaped by rank could admit when ceremony had crossed the line into personal hurt and choose differently afterward. Charlotte asked to see Camilla privately before the Christmas gathering formally ended. No aides entered with them. Charles remained outside, and William did not intervene. The young princess wanted the conversation to belong only to the two people who had been wounded by the same moment in different ways. She explained that she had taken the chair because the earlier remark made her believe she was being pushed away from her grandfather, not because she wanted the queen's position. Charlotte apologized for the humiliation she had caused. She did not pretend the hurt behind her decision had disappeared, but she admitted that taking the seat publicly had turned a private wound into a public defeat. Camilla listened without interrupting. The queen consort, the title used for the wife of a reigning king, answered coldly at first. Then the anger softened. She admitted that her own concern with precedence had become too personal, and that the rehearsal comment should never have been made at all. Charles joined them later and settled the matter for good. The king made clear that ceremonial seating, meaning the formal placement of family members at important royal occasions, would never again be used to express private favor or displeasure toward his grandchildren. Future Christmas arrangements involving William's children would require his direct approval. The rule was simple, but the message was unmistakable. Family relationships would not be managed through place cards. Charlotte accepted that resolution without triumph. At the next family meal, she voluntarily returned to her original position. She did not do it because she had been defeated. She did it because the message she wanted understood had finally been heard. Camilla returned to her usual place beside Charles without demanding another apology. William and Catherine understood the lesson most clearly. Their daughter had discovered that courage could force adults to confront uncomfortable truths. But she had also learned that courage without compassion could become cruelty. Before leaving, Camilla picked up Charlotte's place card and moved it beside Charles for a private family lunch later that week. Charlotte looked surprised. This time, he asked for you there. And that was the lasting meaning of the Christmas banquet. One young princess challenged a seat, the king defended a bond, and a family obsessed with position was reminded that the places carrying the greatest weight are not always the ones assigned by protocol. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.